Karan Sophie.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Benjamin.
How are you?
Good.
Is your full name Benjamin?
Benjamin David Teller.
Okay.
Wow.
I know.
I'm so glad we have that for the record.
What's your middle name, Sophie?
Anne.
Anne? Karan?
Oh, I don't have one.
If you could pick any middle name, what would it be?
You know, I have had this discussion multiple times throughout my life.
Yeah, what would it be?
Actually, so when I was in first
People always
grade,
ask this.
all the kids, and like I grew up in like suburban Seattle. I was surrounded by white kids, and when I told them, I was like, oh, I don't have a middle name, they were like, oh, let's think of one. And the best they could come up with in first grade was Karan Potato Brar. So,
Oh, yeah.
Why potato?
I don't know.
I don't
Maybe because it
know.
was brown. I was brown, and they were like potato.
Probably. I feel like it was racist.
Yeah. I don't know. So there was that. And then there was a hot moment on Jessie when we were filming Jessie where Peyton just turned to me one day and was like, I feel like you could be a Parker. And I was like, huh.
What? I feel like you could be too.
Actually, Karan Parker Brar.
Brar. Yeah. So there was a hot moment where like I had this informal middle name given to me by Peyton List.
Informal.
Sorry. Thank
But
you.
yes, I do think.
So in the comments, everybody suggest what you think Karan's middle name should be if you could pick
Yeah.
one.
You know what the irony of it is? Like my parents were, I was like, oh, why'd you not give me a middle name? They're like, oh, well, we wanted things to be a little bit easier for you in the States, just because like, you know, South Asians, specifically like people who are Punjabi, have like long names.
Yeah.
And I was like, so you name me Karan? Like, you thought-
Right.
You know, which is just, I find very comical.
You know.
Well, we should talk about why we're here. So
Okay.
we've been working together for over 3 years. We started the
Yes.
foundation in 2019. And we spend so much time talking about what we're doing and why we're doing it. But I feel like we often don't share that with all of our fans and all the people that are fundraising. And I think those conversations are just fun and insightful. We always laugh. We're always having a good time. And I don't know. I felt it'd be fun to just have those conversations here in front of everybody. Also some real stuff like why we're doing it, what we're learning about epilepsy, kind of like the problem we're facing, which is pretty big, and how we're going to solve it. And then what we think about the organization as a whole, why we started it, and kind of get into more stories and things like that. Something that I came into the organization about 6 months after you started. You guys obviously started after Cam passed away. You know, in your mind, what was like those first couple months like, and where are we today? Like so much time has passed.
Yeah. Do you want to take it or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was a really crazy and ambitious thing to take on to start this foundation. You know, because not only were we and still are like grieving the loss of Cameron, but it's also we're like, okay, we're all kind of entering this new life without someone very special to us, and we're also trying to like build this very extraordinary thing in a space that we hadn't like. We worked with nonprofits in the past, but we didn't really know like the nuts and bolts of it, and really figuring out like how do we get from point A to point B. Which is like helping people with epilepsy or who are affected by epilepsy in any way.
Yeah, I think on its inception, honestly, what happened was like a mass outpouring of people who wanted to help and do something, because I think Cameron's passing made a lot of people feel very helpless. And a lot of people who first heard about epilepsy and sued up for the first time ever, reaching out, and his parents, Victor and Libby Boyce, were very passionate about being able to kind of continue Cameron on. And so I think this combination of feeling like all of these people wanted to create something and be a part of something with us, it wasn't just like us creating something and hoping, it was actively feeling that support in the creation of it. And so I think that's why we were able to start it so fast, is because we got so much support, and then it kind of did become a learning process. But in a sense, I think we've been learning along with the community for all of these years now, but especially right there at the beginning, because it was just a way for us all to feel like we could do something.
Yeah, I remember like right when I came in, it was like, oh my gosh, we have so many people who are wondering what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And we're like, what do we do? How do we do it? And we got like excited, and then I think we got kind of nervous a little bit.
Yes.
Because we're like, okay, we want to like make sure epilepsy is our priority. But then there's like a big issue with gun violence in America. And then it's like Cam was really passionate about like clean water. And so we really like got our hands and everywhere.
Yes, Cameron's parents were part of their thing with the foundation was continuing the work that he was already doing, and he was working with Thirst Project on clean water, and he was trying to be an advocate for gun violence. He created his own sort of initiative in that regard, and so we wanted to have his voice, and that was so important and still is important to us. And we've managed to incorporate it over the years. We support Guitars Over Guns, who kind of meld the arts that he was very proud of working for, and also gun violence, anti-gun violence. So we still do a little bit of that, but it's exactly like you said. I think we had to take a second to find our own focus because we did have so many people who were willing to help us and waiting to see what we were going to do.
Karan, let's talk about how important the mission is to epilepsy versus how we still want to support causes that Cam is passionate about. Can you share to me how the organization looks at the difference between those two things?
Yeah, I think when Cameron passed away, an immediate conversation around epilepsy was really brought to the forefront. And we were also like learning things as we were going. We had no idea what SUDEP was until after Cameron passed away, as well as like what that space looks like and what kind of resources these people have. And we realized there's that entire community mostly lives in confusion and a little bit of like separation. Like there's not like a clear route to like community and resources and a solution, and also a voice for young people. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that we were not just like, engaging with the parents in these conversations. We wanted to make sure that like the kids that were kind of, hearing the news of Cameron's passing, and also, maybe coping with their own diagnosis or the diagnosis of a loved one, had a clear route to go like, hey, where can I learn? Where can I connect? And where can I like help move the needle forward? And that's where as a foundation, that's the gap that we wanted to fill.
I think the wonderful thing about being a foundation is we can lend our voice where it's needed. And a lot of when we were first created, a lot of it was listening to where we were needed and figuring out we had all of these interests from Cameron, from epilepsy, all of this. And it kind of was a lot about what are our donors responding to and what do they need most. And I think that's how we found ourselves specifically in the epilepsy area of things, because we realized that was the community that we can best serve and needs us most. As much as gun violence and everything's still such a problem, it's overwhelming to go so wide. And so I think that is how we've gotten ourselves here.
Yeah, and I think it's, epilepsy, as we've been focusing on research that is pushing to find a cure and end SUDEP, we've also all been able to like deeply understand Cam, both his fans, but also as his friends, and understand like, okay, this is Cam's like ethos, his values, his morals.
Yeah.
And we've done our best to encompass it under the umbrella of like Cam's causes and try to make sure that it is impactful in that way of being like, this is something Cameron believed in, and this is something that Cam wanted to or did lend his voice towards, and keeping that going, as well as like doing our research with epilepsy.
So what are we doing for the epilepsy community today? Because we are addressing so many issues, right? We're raising money to stop some gun violence, and we are raising money for clean water. But what we are really focusing on is, like you said, curing epilepsy and ending SUDEP. To date, the foundation has raised over $1.5 million, which is really cool. We've given out $350,000 in partnership with Cure Epilepsy for SUDEP research. And we've pretty much educated over 15,000 people through our online resources. So I think in those online resources, we really pride ourselves in helping people understand just about epilepsy. So Sophie, maybe if you could talk about those online resources and the support group that we started and why we started it for people who maybe don't know about it.
Totally. So I think as much as we want to end epilepsy, part of our mission also involves helping people live with epilepsy and helping the loved ones of people who live with epilepsy find each other, connect, and get the support they need. So on our website, you can find information about level 4 centers. You can find a college guide for telling your friends and your family about epilepsy. We have epilepsy first aid on there. We have a little bit of all of that. And I always direct people to our support group, which is on Facebook. It's Now What. There's also Now What is on our website as well if you want to look up the information there. But the Now What support group is really just that. It's about, I have epilepsy, now what do I do? Where do I go? It's so cool to see. I mean, you firsthand manage a lot of it, but getting to kind of see people within the community help each other, ask each other questions, support one another, and kind of get direct answers and directly be able to communicate has been so special, and I think is one of the greatest things our foundation has been able to do, because I know I get DMs all the time about people who are like, I have epilepsy and I've never met anyone else who has epilepsy, and it's a great way to kind of bring those people together and also uplift their voices.
Yeah.
I also think with our resources, we've been getting really specific. I think there's a lot of general information about there, which is, seizure first aid, what is epilepsy, what can you do to treat and manage your seizures. And one of my favorite resources that Sophie's already mentioned is the college guide. I think the goal isn't to make you feel like your life is getting smaller because of epilepsy. It's like, hey, how do we allow you to keep embracing your life and living it to the fullest and understanding your circumstances? And sometimes there can be some awkward conversations you might not know how to navigate once you get the diagnosis, and really being able to fill that gap. So it doesn't feel like you're just, you get this tiny backpack of spark notes about epilepsy and then you're just off on your way. It's like, okay, how do I, navigating going out and partying with epilepsy and I'm in college. What does that look like? Oh, I'm an elementary school teacher. What's the kind of seizure first aid I can leave up in my classroom that kids will easily understand and get? So we're trying to really fill in all those gaps.
You guys have been such a good voice for the epilepsy community, because I'm imagining it would have been nice to know all these things years ago.
Absolutely. And I also think it's such a we've gone through this now with a couple of friends, and epilepsy, it feels big. And there's a lot of different types of it, and it's an overwhelming thing. And when people get diagnosed, they don't want to scare their own friends and family. And the truth is, friends and family want to help, and they want to be there. And our goal is to make everybody more educated and aware, those with and without epilepsy, to make those conversations easier. Because we want you to be able to go to your friends and have open dialogue about your epilepsy. We've had situations with friends where it's like, hey, is it okay with you if on a night out we check in that you took your medication? We don't want to mom you, but we just want to make sure, how would you feel if we did that?
Yeah.
Our friend has been like, oh, I would, that's awesome. I would so appreciate that. It's about having the educational tools to know how to have the conversations that are so hard for everyone to have.
Epilepsy is not the first neurological disorder or issue that we have had a hard time talking about in public, right? There is such a crazy stigma. And I think, Karan, can you talk about the stigma in Hollywood, the stigma in the day-to-day, how people are afraid? What is it like today, and where do we want it to go in a couple years?
Yeah, I think one thing that I notice, first to pick up what we were just talking about, once people get diagnosed, I think it feels like the conversation hits a pause button because we don't have a cure yet. That hey, let's just find you some meds that you feel comfortable with that don't have a crazy amount of side effects, and then great, you're on your way. And that feels like a pause in the conversation until we have a cure. And we want the conversation to be ever evolving. And there's a lot of niche conversations to be had, which is what does it look like when you have epilepsy and you're pregnant? What does it look like when you start dating someone? You're in your first long-term relationship and you have epilepsy. But also in this industry and in any industry, it's hey, what do these conversations look like in my workspace? How do I talk about this with my peers? What is some information I can tell them without feeling like I'm being hovered over or watched or parented? Because I'm sure no one wants to be able to, no one wants to inform people of something very private and then feel great, now I'm grabbing drinks after work with my coworkers and everyone's a little on edge of being are you sure you don't want me to go to the bathroom with you just in case? And you know.
Yeah, and I think there's stigma with all kind of medical issues in the sense of employment and whatnot, and we do have to encourage the open dialogue and accepting and being able to work with each other's challenges.
Yeah.
The Citizens of Epilepsy campaign, which you may have seen if you follow us, basically is we have an amazing group of support people out there who have reached out, and we've had fans send in videos talking about their journey with epilepsy, what they've learned, what they've been diagnosed with, how they're navigating, and just how they're existing in the world and living as a person with epilepsy, because it's not always easy, but it's possible. And we're just trying to share those stories and really normalize those voices.
And add a face to the statistic. You know? I think you hear these like 1 in 26, and you're like, okay, that's a large amount of people. But it doesn't really like come into, like, there's not an image in your head of like a diverse group of people, like millions and millions of people who live with this neurological disorder and who live like really full and amazing lives, or like are young like you and experiencing it, or maybe are entering like really interesting stages of their life where they're like, you know, having grandkids or whatnot. And we want to make sure that everyone feels connected and seen, and not just felt like a number in a statistic.
Yeah. I really am like, it's so cool to be, I didn't know a lot of people with epilepsy before this foundation. And now I feel like we're providing so much voices, so much visibility to people who like probably like never would have gotten the opportunity.
Yeah. Also, isn't it wild? I imagine since you started working with us, like everyone's like, oh, my cousin has epilepsy, or oh, actually my friend does. You suddenly realize that everybody knows someone that has epilepsy, and just how prevalent it is. At least for me, that's been a big thing. And I already had 2 friends with epilepsy, and I still now see it everywhere even more.
Yeah.
And I also think it's been great to, as vulnerable as people have been with us about sharing their diagnosis with us, it's been really great to create, you know, this kind of landing page where people can start their journey with us, and they can learn like, okay, these are the questions I should maybe ask. This is where I should like start looking, because like I said, we don't want the conversation to pause after the diagnosis and you get your medication.
Yeah.
We want it to like continue in a very like healthy, open, and like comfortable way.
And I think we're also like empowering people who are diagnosed with epilepsy to ask the right questions to the doctors. Because from what we're learning, like not all doctors are necessarily talking about SUDEP. Like 1 in 1,000 people will pass from SUDEP. Like that's really sad. And I think for us, it's like there are ways to prevent it. There are questions we can ask. But like, I don't think people really knew a ton about SUDEP until Cam passed away. And like, it's so crappy that has to happen. But I'm hopeful that with our voice, that maybe this can change moving forward. And I think what I would say is like, what do you guys want 5, 10, 20, 30 years? Like pie in the sky, foundation does.
I mean, I'd obviously be amazing to end SUDEP. That would be phenomenal. But
find the cure for epilepsy.
But I think on maybe a smaller, more manageable on a time limit scale, I just hope that we can educate people around SUDEP without scaring them. I think that's always been my big fear with this too. I think a lot of doctors hesitate to talk about SUDEP because they don't want to scare their patients. The thing is, it is a part of reality, and we do have to talk about it. But what I'm proud of with our foundation is through like Citizens in Epilepsy, as much as we talk about those who have passed from SUDEP and from epilepsy, we also talk about those who are living with epilepsy and who live life to the fullest and do anything. And I think it's a tricky balance, because yes, we want to end SUDEP and we want to get the word out, but we also don't want to scare people.
I also want to be able to make the next indicated right step super clear for people. I want to make sure that like after they get diagnosed, that they feel like they know what to do next and where they should go for like whatever they might need or what questions they might have, and making sure that's all in like an easy and accessible place, so they don't feel so much like in the dark and so alone throughout this process. Because that provides so much comfort in knowing like, okay, I think I know what the next step is. I think I know what the next thing for me to do is, and the next conversation for me to have.
Yeah.
So people have to go to our website, right? CameronBoyceFoundation.org. We have an amazing amount of resources that you guys have spent a ton of time on. Us as an organization have spent a ton of time on. But these resources are like downloadable and actionable, and they tell you exactly what to say. They tell you questions to ask your doctor. There's journals you can, a seizure tracker. Like these are things that we've, by talking to people in the space, professionals, saying this is how we can make epilepsy kind of better for the community, how we can make everyone kind of just understand it better. So let's like everyone should go to the
Yeah.
website. We really want people to see that stuff.
Really though, CameronBoyceFoundation.org, it is so true that these resources are so beneficial. If you have epilepsy, if you have a loved one with epilepsy and you just want to check it out, we have special resources for you. Like all of the above, it's I think game changing for sure, and something we're all proud of.
It's ever growing. So it's like if anyone from our community has ideas about it, like we're all ears about what you guys need or want next. Because we want to fill those gaps.
For sure, yeah. Like I always say, like I run our social media. We check our emails. Like our DMs are always open.
Yes.
We always want to hear what people have to say. Like we don't pretend to be the expert. We pretend to want to be the expert down the road, but we are learning about it as we go. And so we want to be there for everybody that has a question. So please just ask us and let us go from there.
Yeah, completely. I think it's so beneficial to get to hear from the community. We have a community advisory board, which has been so helpful in hearing us out, because ultimately, like, what we're trying to do, as I said before, is service the people who need it. How can we leverage this voice that we have because Cameron was so loved and so amazing, and how can we serve people best? Yeah,
I agree. Okay, I want to talk about Cam for a Cause. So our second one is coming up soon.
Yes.
Our first one was a big success. Our second one's going to be bigger. So talk about like how important it is to get everyone together, what we're hoping to get out of this event this year.
Yeah. So we didn't have an event for the first year or so because of the pandemic. And so having our first event was honestly such a cool celebration of all the work that we've done. And it also was an amazing opportunity to raise money. I think the last event left me very inspired. And I think it helps to empower people to make a change and talk to their neighbor about epilepsy. I thought that was such a cool part about our event is everybody asked each other about someone who had epilepsy that night, and it was just a really open, welcoming space. So I'm excited for this year.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be good. Hopefully we'll raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's gonna be put on YouTube, right?
I think the goal is to host the whole entire event on YouTube after we go. Karan's going to be performing. I think you're going to be singing during the event, right?
Right.
I am. So it's actually going to be a 3-hour version, one-woman show of Frozen.
Oh, good.
Which I'm very excited about. Sophie has actually been kind enough to tailor all my looks for it.
Yeah, it was all me.
But in reality, I looked at that event and I was like inspired to, after everyone that we spoke to for years, seeing everyone show up and just to see Libby and Victor's face, to see everyone just really hopeful for the future and just hear the doctors talk. And I think we're excited for everyone to see this year's event. Last year, people didn't get to see it, but we do want to make this public facing. We do want people to see what we're doing because we want to like build this with our fans and with our audience. And we want to build it with our supporters. So that's what we're.
It also feels like Cam when you're at the event. I keep describing the event almost like one of his birthdays because it was always at his house. It would be like a pool party, good music, great food, and it would just be like family and friends running in and out, like having a great time. And that's what the event really feels like. Yeah. And as we get like, more and more people involved, and as we, help like bridge the conversation between a group of people that are incredibly passionate about making a difference and a group of people that are impacted by this, working together, that feels like the physical manifestation of what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, we're charity and we're dealing with something serious.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But we want it to still feel celebratory.
Yeah.
And hopeful.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, and the event is I think a big part of that, and a good way to kind of check in and touch base every year. So we're excited.
Cool. I'm excited too. Can we get into a little bit about maybe Cam? I want to talk about Cam. Like I personally never got to meet him, and I think that
he sucks.
it mostly breaks my heart because I think I would have loved the kid. Like
I totally think you would have.
Without a doubt.
When way like Libby explains it to me, I'm like, I would have just loved to like dance and hang out.
You guys would have absolutely been little kindred spirits for sure.
And I feel it. I feel like he's with us in the organization all the time, and I
agree.
And like you guys do such a good job of just like bringing his energy and his spirit in everything that we do. But I wanted to ask you guys, as people who were just like really, really close and around him so much, what was it like a couple years ago versus like what's it like today in your day to day, in your experience and working with the foundation? I'd love for both of you guys to share whatever you feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, I think grief is an ever-changing thing. And it's not something that you just like shed and it leaves you one day. Like the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like you're getting used to the weight of something new. And when you're first holding it, it feels very heavy and it feels very debilitating and you feel stuck. And I mean, I think our entire friend group felt that when we lost Cam. Everyone felt that. And then, you know that this is going to be a part of your life. And then some days you're like, okay, I know this is heavy to hold, but like I'm eager to step into the future. And your stride is a little bit longer and you're, working a little bit harder to get up that mountain. And I think what's been really great is as hard as losing Cam was, I now personally am like in this search of like gratitude of like in the moments of my day that I do find Cam. And I think like where I'm very lucky is like I find a lot of Cam within my friendships, particularly my friendship with Sophie. And it still feels very alive through that.
Yeah, I think it, in comparison to years ago, I mean, I think there obviously is sort of this state of shock and processing and this kind of dramatic life shift. And I think going through years of grieving now, you start to get to a place where it's somewhat like you said, where there is gratitude for who he was and the person he is and where he is still all with us now. But there's also sort of, I think I was afraid a lot at first of any kind of, I don't want to say moving on, but moving forward. I think I was afraid of that feeling that he would go away if I, lived life. And I think it's in so many ways the opposite. I think in moving forward with our life, and we felt this a lot at first too, but I have always felt the closest to Cameron in the times of like laughing and having fun and when we're dancing and doing the things that I'm like, oh, he just would love to be here. I think that's what always makes me feel closest to him is actually the really good times. And so I found a lot of peace in that with my grieving, that it almost doesn't have to be so heavy and sad for me to feel connected to him.
Yeah. Man, you guys are so mature. Like, I'm a little bit older, but I think like it's wild to hear you guys talk about it like this. It just is,
Well, thanks.
it feels, I can't imagine the feelings of loss, but to hear the way you guys talk about it today, it's inspiring, first of all.
Thanks.
And you guys have done such a good job of just like making me feel like I knew him.
That is, it's funny. We're so different than he was. I feel like
So
you and
different.
I are so different than him. But that is always what I hope in general, that like I feel like we have some of his essence with us when we meet people, like what we learned from him and can bring to the space.
Yeah, without a doubt. I always struggle because, especially if I'm meeting new people and they learn about Cameron, I just always struggle because like I don't even have like words to describe who Cameron was, or just like and the best I can do is I was like, Cameron was the best, and it's like that doesn't feel like it does justice. So it's like like we've sat on calls and it's like, oh, I wish you guys could have met him, and then I'm like, it's so funny that you say that because I'm like, I felt like at least I personally have done a horrible job of describing him because I don't think I've fully encompassed who he is.
But even like the way you say the best, like your smile goes up here, it's all the way, and I'm like, oh, the best means like
It's
the best.
energy of it,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think we have managed, I get what you're saying in the sense that I think when someone passes, I really do strongly believe that the best parts of them stay with the people that are behind. And that's like how we move forward and how we get on. And I know for me, it was really profound to like look at all my friends and really comforting right when he passed and be like, I see this piece of him in you and I see this piece of him in you. And like, that was a sort of a comfort to me, and I still feel that way. And I like to think that that's kind of how he carries on in for the people that haven't been able to meet him, but still like feel so close.
And this is like something that I wanted to ask you guys for a while. It's like there's this like people see his videos online, right?
Yeah.
They watch him and they see it and they feel like they know him, which is like great, right? It's so great that you feel like you know, but really like the way those videos are not the way you know him. You know him on a more personal level. You know him as your best friend, as your brother, as someone you just love, right? So it's like, I guess what I would ask you that we can maybe share with the audience is like, what do you think that maybe those videos don't portray? Or what do you maybe think there was a little bit different, or that you want people to know that maybe they're missing, or they would have never known if you didn't tell them?
You know what's so interesting is that, like, Cameron was a very authentic person. You know, I don't think you were getting a false version of him, whether he was in front of the camera acting, or whether he was in an interview, or whether he was with us in private. I think what's actually so great about people feeling so connected to Cameron is that, and this goes for every friendship, you know, when you like love someone and you're friends with them, you almost speak your own kind of language. And even though the three of us spent so much time together, I feel like I have a different language with Soph than I did with Cam, and Cam had a different language with Soph than with me. And in a way, it's actually really cool that people have these like individualized like connections to Cameron, similar to a way that like we all did. Because it's not like the same Cameron in all these different relationships. He showed up in really unique and special ways for all of us in different scenarios.
Yeah, I think celebrity is a strange concept, and I think the way that we all feel connected to celebrities in different capacities is a completely interesting facet of society, and it's totally natural. And I actually agree with Karan that I think his core essence very much does come across in pretty much everything you see of him, because he was that guy. I think maybe what people wouldn't know is that it wasn't like this is I need to phrase this better, but like, he's not a performer. He was never putting on a performance. He just like existed, and people wanted to look at him. Like, his attention was, he was someone that captured people's like hearts and attention very easily. And so almost I would argue that everything that you know about him, it's like even more authentic than you would think.
Yeah, I also feel like, I mean, one thing that I want people to know, and I think this is always like a funny bickering point for all of us, is Cameron had the greatest laugh, but he would laugh at anything.
Yes.
And I have terrible jokes, but I would at least like to believe and convince myself that Cameron laughed at my jokes authentically. Yeah. And then Sophie would be like, yeah, but just because Cameron thought it was funny doesn't mean it's funny. And then when the three of us would go out, Sophie and I could tell when Cameron was just laughing to like help, you know, make things not awkward.
What a good friend.
Yeah. Like a great friend. So people would leave a conversation with Cameron being like, he thought I was hilarious.
Yes.
But like, nah, that person wasn't funny.
No, he just, and I think that's like my favorite thing about Cameron.
So if you're trying stand-up, you want Cam in the audience.
Oh, without a doubt.
Oh, for sure. And you'll be able to identify his laugh in a heartbeat.
From a mile away.
Yeah, that definitely is true. It's like a little tidbit about him. It's a good point.
Yeah, I find my favorite videos, because like I'm on social media, everyone tags him. My favorite are like the random ones of him dancing. Did he always like just dance? All the time. But like, did he need music to dance, or he just like danced?
No,
just the way he walked. Was it like to a beat?
Yeah, no, we would just suddenly start like he just suddenly started dancing at all times.
Yeah.
I think it's like a dancer thing when you have the music's just kind of always in your head. You can't get a song out of your head. I think that was him. It's always like humming some sort of tune and dancing along. And
I think I always took advantage of this part of like your guys' friendship, you and Cameron's friendship, which is you guys did so many deep dives on music and bonded so deeply about music and dance, because you know, for those of you that don't know, like Sophie grew up dancing her entire life.
Yeah.
And I would always be like, okay, what are the top hits? Like, just give me the ones that I can like download so I can look really cool. But yeah, like Cameron was always dancing, not because like
it wasn't to get attention.
It wasn't to get attention. It wasn't to look cool. He was like in his own world having a great time. And like, what's so amazing is that like Cameron never had any kind of like snootiness or like about like dancing, of being like, oh, that person's like not a good dancer and that was like cringy. Like, to see other people living and embracing their life was like, that's what made him like super happy. I think like one of the biggest missions that I think Sophie, Cameron went on was just trying to get me to dance.
Oh yeah.
Like as we got older, like I was terrified
Get him to dance. He would never dance with us, and now he dances, and it makes me and our friend Zoe, our other best friend, very happy because we're like, Cameron would be so happy.
But that's what I'm saying is you took that from and you
No, I'm
like...
not kidding though. He really does dance a lot now, and
I've yet to see you dance.
it is it's for sure.
Weeks, I'll see you.
You will. No, he does now, and that is like, I think that is a very, very true story about Cameron.
I always thought about this, and I never actually like figured it out, or I don't even know where to look. But like, do you guys remember the first time you met Cam and his family, Libby, Victor, Maya, everyone?
I definitely remember the first time I met Cameron, and I'm pretty sure I remember the first time I met Victor too, but I'm not 100%. I met Cameron in one of my final auditions for the Disney show we did, and I remember I was like alone in the hallway for some reason, and it was after, and I was so nervous about how I did because I wanted the job really bad, and he already had it. And he came out and he like gave me a fist bump, and he was like, "I'll see you soon." And I was like, I think I got it. But anyway, I think that's the first time I met him. Victor has a very similar laugh to Cameron, and I do remember very early on.
Same laugh and same smile.
Yes, and same smile. Hearing the two of them laugh in the middle of our soundstage, I think is probably the first time I really met Victor. But Victor and Libby are just very welcoming, open arms family. I think for both of us, and you knew them before I did, but very much walking into their home felt so warm, and like we were very safe there.
Yeah.
And like coming home there, and I think they've tried to do this with the foundation, and you kind of get that feeling when you meet them. They're very like open arms, and they want to help, and they are really drawn to people and their stories, and I think they were just a wonderful family to kind of meet. They're very much an extension of him.
So I first met Cam when I was auditioning for Jessie, and I remember briefly I had auditioned for it once, and then they called me back for like a later round audition or whatnot, and then I saw Cameron in the waiting room, and I saw Victor, his dad, and then I left. My dad was like, "How'd you think you did?" And I was like, "Oh, I think I did pretty good." And I was like, "But that kid, like, I think he's my biggest competition." And I don't know why, it was like such a weird thing. Like I just thought it. I just like knew. And then we were like auditioning for the final rounds of Jessie, and like they called us both in to audition with each other against each other. It was like a very interesting thing, but we both ended up booking it. And kind of the great thing was, like, when I first moved down to California, I quite literally had no friends. Like I was 12 years old. It was just me and my dad in an apartment, and we were in the same neighborhood as Cameron's family. We were like right around the corner. And Cameron immediately was just like, "Well, do you want to hang out after work?" And I was like, always like, "Are you sure you're not like sick of me or whatever?" And I kept having these moments with Victor and Libby where I was like, okay, this is now where they're gonna get sick of me and be like, "Can this kid go home?" And there would be these moments where they were like, "Oh, hey, like Cameron, we're probably gonna have like dinner at like 6:30 or whatnot. You guys want to go to that Thai restaurant?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, like Libby, I'll have my dad pick me up." And she's like, "No, you're going with us. Like you're going out with us. What are you talking about?" Like.
So was Cam your first friend in LA?
Yeah, Cameron was my first friend, and we kind of just like immediately became best friends. And then when he started working on Gamer's Guide, and he met Soph, and he was just like, "Hey, I met this like really cool person named Sophie. I think we should hang out. I think you should hang out with us sometime." And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then
we just did.
The three of us just were really inseparable.
Like 14, 15?
Yeah, we were
15, 16.
15, 16. I think I met you guys when I was 15. Like, my 16th birthday was like my first day on set. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's a very funny memory that I have actually.
When we first started this organization, we were kind of built off the backs of the support of Cam's fans. And Cam's fans and us at the time were all young adults. Mm-hmm. And I find that young adults today are feeling extremely helpless. And I do feel that because we're kind of reading the comments and we're listening and we're saying, man, like there's gun violence in this country. There's not clean water. There's all these issues, right? And we've done our best to support in areas that we can that Cam was passionate about. And we obviously are focused mostly on epilepsy. But as young adults, what kind of advice do you have for other young adults who maybe feel helpless in certain areas? Like, how do young adults create change? What are the steps they should be taking? What kind of advice do you guys have for them? And please, both of you answer. Like, this is such a big question.
I think so much change can be made within your own community. The micro affects the macro. And I think it's like, really important when we hear about these, issues that are impacting us as like a human race. We kind of like want to go like, great, how do we tackle this in the most like the biggest, most impactful way possible? And that is important, but it can easily make you feel helpless. Because you feel like, okay, well, I don't feel like I'm chipping away at this problem fast enough. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but like having conversations, helping connect the dots for people, like guiding them to resources or like contributing in a way that like, your dollar is going to make an impact, like that can really help. Those things do add up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I'm impressed by young people who are speaking up, for sure. And our foundation has uniquely had that angle for a while. And I think, and this kind of goes alongside sort of grief as well for me, I think people get really focused on that you have to be like a celebrity or have a big name or do something huge to kind of make an impact. But I have found that the people who have like made such a strong impact, it's just because of the individual people in their lives. Like focus on your neighbor, focus on your friend, focus on how, like you said, have that conversation with your friend and how you support them and kind of talk through that, because that stuff does matter. Like how we interact on our daily basis matters a lot. Yes, social media matters and spreading information far and wide matters, but so do our interpersonal relationships and how we can affect one another in that way. I think that that's a big thing that I would tell young people is just because you're only impacting one person doesn't mean you're doing nothing.
Yeah, and we often think that like if the end goal is too far, we feel like it's not worth trying.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's always, it makes sense that that's like a fear, but I also think like these things are very micro.
Yeah.
They happen like one step at a time.
I mean, you've been an advocate for cancer since you were young. How do you feel like that has been as a young person? Like, I feel like you have a lot of experience in this.
I often think that there's really no quick answer to solving a big problem.
Yes.
But I often think that if you can make enough impact in your community and you can have enough thoughtful conversations and you start to really just learn how to say, what to say, when to say, and who to say it to, you're going to make an impact. But I think for me, the hardest part was like not getting deterred.
Yeah.
And right, I've been thinking about cancer for 15 years now. And if I would have ever thought where we were 15 years ago to where we are today, I would have said, oh, I would do it. But then I would be like, nah, I'm not going to do it. So I think for me, it's like just not focusing so much on the end goal, but focusing on how you feel by doing good.
That made me emotional because I'm such a pessimist. I'm not kidding. I'm like bad about it. And it's ironic for someone who helps with the foundation because I think the hopefulness and like what you just said about you can't always see the end goal. It's not always clear. And just having faith that what you're doing will make that difference is huge. And it's really hard. I don't know. It's hard for young people. It's hard for everyone.
And I don't think we have to like have so much hope that it's going to work out. We just have to have hope that we're going to feel better and empowered if we actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Because our anxiety and our fear comes from inaction.
Yeah.
So if we just have a healthy conversation around a cancer or epilepsy or anything that or global climate, whatever it is, if we start to have the conversations, we'll feel less hopeless.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest thing is to do something, and something's better than nothing, right? And that's so like cliche, but it really matters to just be like, even if you vote, you're like, my vote's not going to matter. But like, it is. You're at least going to feel better when you go home that you tried.
Yeah.
If you don't try, you want to feel better about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel so good every time I vote, even though like it's exactly what you said. I'm always telling myself like, does this even matter? And then afterwards I'm like, wow, I did my research and
I'm
at least
a great citizen.
I did what I could. You know what I mean? I'm doing what I can, I feel like is what is important.
Also getting down to the basics or the simple things that I can do next really help me a lot. So even when I'm having like a bad day or I feel overwhelmed, particularly with the foundation, I mean, wanting to find a cure for epilepsy that's a big order to make, you know? And for me, sometimes I'm just like, you know what? Like, I made that spreadsheet. I did that thing we need to do. I like, that I'm like, okay, this is at least helping move things along or help support our community that is like engaging in their own way.
What do you think? What are you guys most hopeful? Like we're now obviously, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, maybe. Well, I'm very hopeful about the power of the voice of the youngest generation around right now. What would you guys say? What are you most hopeful for? What inspires you about the generation kind of below you? Because you guys have inspired me a ton.
Oh,
like
nice.
I am beyond inspired by the fact that you guys have done so much after losing somebody you love to move forward. It gives me hope that, when I have kids one day, they're going to be better than me. And I think about that today. And I want to hear from you guys what you guys think about the future generations.
I think for me, it's always been, what's been exciting is that with millennials, and I think us as a little bit of in-betweeners between like millennials and Gen Z, but more so Gen Z because I'm here for the PR association, is that as we're having these conversations, I think we're like so desperate for answers at the same time. And I think what's so great about the next generation is that we can be okay with having vulnerable and honest conversations and taking our time to find those answers that we're seeking. Because I don't think we need to rush that process all the time. And this willingness to have like those conversations, willing to have those conversations when you're ready and how you want to. Because sometimes, change doesn't always look like screaming from, the top of a mountain, but it's just, talking in the privacy of your home with someone you love.
I think that with every generation for years now, the category that is young people at whatever time, a part of the reason they have so much power is they're fearless. And I think, unfortunately, as we age, we lose a little bit of that. And I'm constantly inspired again by young people who remind me to not like let my fear rule me, and like fear of it not actually happening, fear of nothing actually making a difference, all of that. I think not being afraid of conversations that are really hard to have. I think Gen Z is so good about that. I mean, the amount of patience that they have with having conversations about difficult topics is so impressive to me. So I would say I'm really hopeful that sort of fearless passion will continue to move the needle forward, like no matter who the young generation is. And then advice-wise, I would just say like, educate yourself.
Oh, are we supposed to give advice?
I don't know.
Oh.
But I'm just saying, like, educate yourself. Like, I think for all young people,
Karan, what's your advice to your generation?
I mean, don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up.
Don't fumble the bag. No, I think Sophie's been around enough to hear this advice regurgitated a million times, so forgive me. But I always feel like it's gonna be fine, and I'm not saying that in a sense of like be lazy and be complacent in your situation, but as we've been talking about, like sometimes these issues feel really overwhelming, or the things in your life feel like inescapable and too large to handle. Mm-hmm. But it's that trusting that like you are capable, we are capable, we're gonna be fine. And our willingness to like want to do better is gonna take us farther than we think it is.
Okay, so Kar, will you break down kind of the structure of the team at TCBF? Yeah,
so we're actually as large as a community as we have, we actually have a really small team that's running the foundation. So we have our director, Heather. We have you, Benjamin, who, oversees like community social media. We have our advisory board, and we have our like board of directors. Sophie and I are part of the advisory board, and pretty much like right now it's like a ragtag group of people who just like jump in where they can to help out. I know like Casey, our PR director, like she'll like, yes, PR is her title, but like she'll jump in wherever she can, and she's a part of those conversations and wherever like whatever we might be discussing as a foundation. And same thing with us. It's like we could be talking about like, hey, what research grant do we want to fund next, to being like, do we like that color for the social media post?
People always ask us like, what do we do with the foundation? And we had to like create a title for ourselves because we didn't really know. So we just call ourselves like creative advisors. We're the
Oh,
advisory
I'm
board
being
members.
Queen and king of the foundation.
Wow.
I
wow.
mean, yeah, it's
But
just
really,
Princess? I mean,
Prince
yeah.
and Pri-
Jester? What do we
I
want to
mean,
do?
really, truly, the foundation was started on the Boyce family kitchen table with Libby and Victor and all of us just being like, what are we doing? And Cameron's aunt and my mom was involved heavily at the beginning. Everyone was just trying to sit there and pitch in, and Libby and Victor sort of leading us until we got Heather on as our director and you. And so we all at the foundation do a lot of different things, as you know. And so we don't even have a clear title, but we all just kind of jump in and help as we can. It is kind of very grassroots in that sense.
I do think it's pretty interesting, right? We feel big to our audience. We have millions of followers, and we are building this foundation because of Cameron. But like, really, we are small. Yeah. We are in multiple text threads. We are asking each other every question on every detail. No one decides one thing. We all decide together. And to me, like, feels like a startup.
Yeah, it does.
Right. We're just like, what next? We're like, let's try this. It's like, great. And that to me, what I think makes us special. We are not pretending to be the best.
Yeah.
We are saying we're going to work the hardest.
Yeah.
And we're going to listen to people. And we really want to make an impact. And I think that goes with like, just at the top, like I've now worked with Libby and Victor for over 2 years, and every decision they want to be a part of.
Yep.
And I think that's exactly the way a good startup is. The people who started an organization, a business, a foundation, they want to make sure that we're doing exactly what their vision was. And I can't imagine the grief that Libby and Victor feel having to just pretty much have Cameron always in the news around the foundation still. But I'm hopeful that they're feeling a sense of pride and gratitude and just like some resolve that we're working really hard to keep his legacy alive. And I love just, we'll get pictures of Libby traveling and speaking at a SUDEP conference, or, we'll get a picture of Vic riding a bike with his friends wearing a Cameron Boyce, Foundation shirt. And
he would definitely be very proud of them, for sure. And all of us, I think. It's definitely, like we've said, the grassroots sort of spirit, very much with Cameron, too.
I also think what's been great is there's a sense of connectedness that we feel with Cameron when we're like doing these projects and we see our community coming together. Like, for example, you look at our merch line, for example. All the people that we have model are like friends of Cameron's and ours. And, Sarah Carpenter, who is Sabrina Carpenter's sister, like she photographed our first like merch shoot and like did all of that, like, and all these people are just lending their resources, in hopes to like move the needle forward. And that's been like so cool to see like this outpour of love, both like, privately in our day to day, but also in like, in the grand scheme of things.
It does feel like one big family. Right, yeah. An extension from that conversation at the table with your mom and Cam's aunt and Vic and Libby, and then you bring in me and you bring in Heather, and you guys are involved. Like, you guys aren't less involved now; you're more involved now.
Right.
And I think that's why we're still here today. And I just think I'm extremely hopeful. I didn't know anything about epilepsy before I started, and I'm like, wow, I actually think we're going to keep making a big impact.
Yeah.
And like, why not? Like, someone's got to do it.
I know. It is true. It does feel like it has to be someone. And in a way, I think we were like, none of us really asked for this, but it happened, and we're all making the best out of it that we can. And I think his parents have been such a great example of sort of turning a terrible situation into something really beautiful in the best way that you can.
I do dearly admire you both for being a part of this foundation after going through that grief. It's been really fun to work with you and now be your friends. I hope lifelong friends. And I think it's really important what you're doing for not just the epilepsy community, but like young adults and just as good humans. And so my advice to you guys would be don't ever change. And I really am looking forward to not only like what we accomplish in this organization together, but what you guys accomplish in your personal lives. And thanks for taking the time to do this. And yeah, I really do care about you both, and I'm just happy to be here.
Wow.
You're not going to cry.
And on that note, we're not going to cry. So I was thinking, could you read us the Cameron Boyce mission statement?
I think I might have it memorized.
Oh.
Rip it.
Yes. The Cameron Boyce Foundation aims to end epilepsy and cure SUDEP through funding research, educational, and awareness campaigns while still supporting causes that Cameron cared about deeply.
I think it's sorry, we're curing epilepsy and finding SUDEP.
That was pretty good though.
Wow. Ours says aiming to cure epilepsy. It doesn't even mention SUDEP.
Wrong.
So.
Wow.
Team Sophie for the win. On that note,
I did get it wrong.
we love you
though.
guys. Love
Bye,
you.
kids.
Bye.